Before we jump into it, let me welcome you to the Deep Penetration Podcast. My name is Danny, and I am a self-esteem and love coach that works with gay and bisexual men. So please make sure you are subscribing to the podcast and my other platforms if you want to hear more content like this episode. I will provide you with all the information that you need in the description of this episode, including a free gift that you are not going to want to miss out on. So let us jump into the topic for today, which is, as you saw by the title of the episode, Internalized Homophobia and how it is impacting gay relationships. Now, I know that the title of this episode is pretty intense, and I did that on purpose, right? I wanted the title to provoke some emotion and some thought around the subject because I think that it is incredibly important. And as a bisexual man myself who grew up religious in a heterosexual household, I always felt different, right? I've talked about this before. I was bullied a lot in school for acting different than the other boys. My dad was not accepting of my feminine mannerisms or when I wanted to express myself by playing with my sister's toys. And you know, I was taught from a very early age that homosexuality was a sin by priests at the Catholic school that I attended. In fact, I have this very clear memory from my childhood that I've revisited, right, and processed periodically throughout my life. And basically, when I was like 8 or 10 years old, I was in my bedroom. Well, the bedroom that me and my sister shared growing up. And I went into the closet and I grabbed one of my sister's dresses and I put it on because I wanted to kind of see and feel what it was like. And the first thing that I did when I put it on was I started to spin just to kind of watch the dress like fan out and the pattern and the look and all of those things, right? And I was like totally mesmerized by this. I had never experienced anything like it. And even to this day, I can recall the feeling of like freedom and like pure joy that came from like the act of spinning around in a dress, like super innocent, right? And to be honest, at the time, I looked up to my big sister in some strange adolescent way. I felt like more connected to her in that moment because we both kind of shared in that experience of wearing a dress. And, you know, I knew that I wasn't a girl and that I couldn't be a girl. At the time, there wasn't conversations, you know, regarding transsexuality and transitioning and on any of those things. But I knew that I didn't want to be a girl. That's not to say that somebody out there who identifies as a girl who is currently a boy should not feel justified in that feeling. No, I want to validate you and say that that's completely fine. And your feelings and how you identify is completely valid. It's just for me, I knew that I did not want to be a girl. I just wanted to express myself freely, regardless of like gender roles and expectations, which I didn't even know what that was, right, when I was doing that. And I was so excited. I went out into the living room and showed everyone. And while my grandma, right, my abuela, and my mom were supportive, my dad was not. He immediately looked at me with like this look of disapproval. And he was like, "Take that shit off. You're not a girl." And that was my first experience with shame regarding my sexuality. And after that experience, I became acutely aware of my inability to express the more feminine aspects of my personality for fear of criticism and judgment, or worse yet, disapproval, right? Expressing myself freely and embracing my feminine side came with the risk of losing my dad's favor and quite possibly his love. And why do I bring this up? This example is the foundation for the theory of internalized homophobia. And it is the involuntary belief in societal prejudices and stereotypes about homosexuality by individuals who identify as LGBTQ+, right? And how does this impact your relationships as a gay or a bisexual man? So If you harbor any negative feelings towards yourself or your sexuality, it will be difficult for you to navigate a romantic relationship in a healthy way. And as RuPaul says, right, Mama Ru, if you have not watched RuPaul's Drag Race, you probably should, because it is an amazing show. If you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love somebody else, right? And here's the thing. Having a negative perception of yourself as a gay or bisexual man does not necessarily have to be linked to internalized homophobia. Whether you are straight or gay, we all experience issues with self-confidence at some point in our lives. When that lack of self-confidence comes from shame surrounding your sexual orientation, that is when it can be identified as internalized homophobia. But before we jump into the specifics of how it can ruin your relationships or how it can affect your relationships negatively, I want to unpack the term a bit. I recently published an episode from my podcast titled How to Overcome Internalized Homophobia, and a viewer left a comment, and I thought was incredibly interesting and very valid, right? And it was a longer comment, so I won't get into the entire thing, but in summary, he raised an alternate perspective of how the term itself can perpetuate shame. And I want to read. I'm gonna pull it up right here. I want to read what the comment said. So the comment read, "My conclusion from all that is that sometimes concepts that are used to rephrase our life story and make us more liberated and satisfied can also in the same breath make others very miserable just because they acted as they were designed to, as a survival natural mechanism machine by adapting to their native society. I feel all the time that more than I suffer from homophobia from straights, I suffer from LGBTQ members who use the term internalized homophobia towards me without really knowing me. And I hope that everyone who advocates for this subject will take that into account." So, that being said, it got me thinking about the term internalized homophobia and what that can actually mean and do to somebody, right? Because having the awareness around it is really important. And understanding that, if you harbor any kind of internalized shame, the purpose of that is to shed light on it, to unpack it, to process it, to heal from it, and to move on from it. But in the same breath, utilizing certain terms like homophobia may make somebody feel negatively about themselves because they are essentially feeling like they are homophobic, right? So I wanted to kind of dive in a little bit more into the origins of internalized homophobia. So let's have a quick little lesson about that. So put your learning caps on and take out your notebook and your pen. I'm just kidding. No, but unless you want to, if you want to, that's fine. But in order to keep this as brief as possible, I wrote down some key points. So let me read those as well. I don't know why I closed my computer because I'm going to have to read those regardless. Let's see. So here we go. So when it comes to internalized homophobia, the term itself gained traction in the late 20th century when psychologists, most notably George Weinberg, who coined the term homophobia in the 1960s, which laid the groundwork and highlighted how negative societal attitudes towards non-heterosexual relationships could be internalized by members of the LGBTQ+ community. That's one. Two, due to his research, the field of psychology began to explore how internalized homophobia affects a person's self-perception, mental health, and overall behavior. Right? So the most notable studies were done by Gregory Herrick. Gregory Herrick created the framework for understanding sexual stigma and distinguished between enacted stigma, which is discrimination and violence, and felt stigma, which is awareness of societal attitudes, and internalized stigma, which is personal acceptance of societal prejudice, right? Essentially, internalized stigma and internalized homophobia are one in the same. So after my exchange with a viewer on YouTube, I wanted to find the term that was less shameful in its presentation. And I will say moving forward, I will prefer to use, or I will refer to internalized homophobia as internalized stigma. So now that we've established that, let's get back to the original question. How is it impacting your ability to have a healthy relationship, right? So we need to talk about self-esteem and self-worth. When it comes to low self-esteem, internalized stigma can lead to feelings of unworthiness or inadequacy. So if you struggle with these feelings, you may find it challenging to believe you deserve love and respect, which is fundamental for a healthy relationship. A lot of men that I've worked with self-sabotage. So if you struggle with low self-esteem, you might unconsciously sabotage your relationships either by pushing your partner away or by tolerating poor treatment and believing that you don't deserve better. How else can it contribute? Trust and intimacy issues, right? So the fear of rejection. Internalized stigma often breeds a fear of rejection, not just from society, but from your partner as well. And this can lead to difficulties in building trust and intimacy and being vulnerable. Emotional distancing, to protect yourself from potentially getting hurt. You might keep somebody at an emotional distance, preventing them from getting to know you really on a deeper level. And it doesn't allow you to actually really connect with your partner in the long run. Communication barriers, right? So difficulty expressing your needs. Internalized stigma can make it difficult for you to openly express what you are actually feeling without the fear of being judged or criticized or rejected. There's a lot of miscommunication that comes with that, right? Because of the fear that's associated with that kind of internalized shame and that fear of being rejected and just really wanting to be accepted and be validated. So it can lead to a lot of miscommunication, a lot of misunderstandings, which are detrimental for a relationship, right? The health of that relationship. There's also issues with conflict resolution. And the reason for why is because a lot of people who harbor shame, right, that internalized stigma, have a tendency of being avoidant. So if you're an avoidant type, that means that you cringe whenever there's conflict, right? Why? Fear of rejection. And that low self-worth can make you avoid conflict altogether, which over time will lead to unresolved issues. On the flip side of that, there's also excessive conflict, right? Some individuals who suffer from internalized stigma or that kind of internalized shame are overly defensive and therefore can be very aggressive in their approach. You feel the need to always defend yourself. You feel the need that you feel like you're always being attacked and therefore you have to attack back because if not, who's going to look out for you and who's going to advocate for you? And reacting more strongly in that way to perceived criticism or rejection is going to cause a lot of issues within your relationship. That can be romantic, that can be platonic, that can be friends, whatever the case may be. Let's talk about sexual intimacy, right? There's sexual shame that can be attached to this. Internalized stigma often manifests as sexual shame, leading to discomfort with sexual intimacy. And this can create some barriers to a fulfilling sexual relationship. There's also what am I trying to say here? Risky sexual behavior. Some of you may engage in risky sexual behavior as a form of self-punishment or as a way to seek validation, which can harm your relationship. And it's not just about harming your relationship with your partner, but it's also about harming your relationship with self. There's the dependency on validation. So it's seeking that external validation. If you struggle with internalized stigma, you might overly rely on your partner or other people for validation to have that sense of self-worth, which will lead over time to an unhealthy sense of dependency. There's jealousy and insecurity. That dependency can also manifest in you feeling to be in control all the time. Look, at the end of the day, the list can go on and on and on and on here. And I don't want to get too stuck on focusing on just the negatives here. Because like I said, there's so many ways that having that shame and carrying that shame can impact you personally and impact your relationships. Not only that, but it also impacts your partner as well, right? It takes an emotional toll on them. It prevents mutual growth. It prevents that person from growing as an individual because they are constantly feeling the need to be there for you and to help you and to get you through whatever it is that you're going through. So then the question becomes like, how do you start to overcome this, right? How do you start to overcome that internalized stigma? A big part of this is going to be the self-reflection portion and understanding that it's there to begin with. And even if you don't want to call it internalized homophobia or internalized stigma, there's still some underlying shame there that needs to be unpacked when it comes to your acceptance of your sexual orientation and who you are as a person. That's a road in and of itself. That's a process in and of itself. Exposing yourself to culture and educating yourself about the LGBTQ plus community and what it means to be gay and what it means to be bisexual and what it means to navigate that in today's modern world, I think is going to be really important. Having that knowledge base can help you to not feel so alone in that process. Respecting yourself and setting boundaries. Understanding that maybe the over sexual promiscuity or this risky sexual behaviors and the need for validation is actually a form of self-sabotage. And if you choose to choose yourself, right? Choose yourself. If you decide to choose yourself and maybe step away from those things for a little bit, just so that you can kind of unpack and process and heal, allowing yourself to not believe you are repressing yourself. And that's a thin line, right? That you're walking, because I've done that myself too. And there's ways that you can explore your sexuality in a healthy way that don't have to have a negative impact on your mental, emotional, or physical health. I speak as an individual who was sexually assaulted myself and had to go through that process. Not easy, but possible. I say all of these things because I so often see with men that I am working or men that I work with, this internalized shame that drives or fuels a lot of the negative mindset and the negative behaviors and the lack of belief in self that results in these failed relationships over and over and over again. So if this is something that you relate to, if this is something that resonates with you, reach out to me. Let's have a conversation. I will also tag in this video the other video of the process of overcoming internalized stigma, which reminds me I need to change the title on that, since now moving forward, I'm going to be using the term internalized stigma. But I will link that in this video as well if you just want more information on how you can overcome it. If you're still struggling, or if you just want to have a one-on-one conversation, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to do that. All the information that you need is going to be in the description of this episode. I hope that you found this to be helpful. I hope that you're having an incredible day. And to the individual who left me that comment and helped me to expand my mindset and my perception on the term itself, I thank you. All right, guys, I'll see you in the next episode.